Greetings, history travelers. Welcome back to another epic journey into the past. Ancient legend speaks of a divine wind that descended from the heavens to save a doomed nation. In the late 13th century, the mighty Mongol Empire had conquered almost everything. Now, their ruthless eyes turned toward the isolated island of Japan, hungry for conquest. Could fragile mortal steel withstand the wrath of this massive war machine? Or would nature intervene? By 1281, Kublai Khan commanded the most terrifying military force on Earth. Having crushed mighty empires across Asia and Europe, his hunger for total dominance grew stronger. The isolated island nation of Japan stood as the final defiant prize in the East. Ancient records state that the Mongols amassed an unbelievable fleet of 4,000 warships. Carrying 100,000 fierce warriors, this armada darkened the horizon of the sea. As this colossal shadow approached Hakata Bay, local guards felt their blood run completely cold. The defenders had never seen ships of such monstrous scale, looming like dark, floating fortresses. Panic spread rapidly through the Japanese ranks as war horns echoed across the crashing waves. The invaders did not merely bring overwhelming numbers. They brought terrifying new weapons. Armor-piercing crossbows unleashed a deadly rain, tearing through traditional samurai defenses. Furthermore, the Mongols introduced explosive ceramic bombs, known as the dreadful Tetsuhao. Deafening explosions shattered the coastal silence, throwing the defenders into absolute chaos. Shrapnel and fire rained down upon the beaches, turning the black sand into a crimson, burning nightmare. To proud samurai, an enemy striking from afar with fierce fire was deeply dishonorable. Yet survival demanded fast adaptation. They braced for the brutal infantry landing. Thousands of hardened Mongol warriors aggressively stormed the shoreline, wielding curved blades and long spears. The initial clash of heavy steel against steel echoed a dark, tragic fate for the brave Japanese. Heavy lamellar armor protected the invaders, making samurai sword strikes mostly useless. Tragic devastation unfolded as the disciplined Mongol formations pushed mercilessly forward. Imagine facing an unstoppable wave of elite warriors. Would your courage hold under such fire? Despite terrifying odds, the warriors of Kamakura refused to yield an inch of their homeland. They fought with a desperate, ferocious spirit, knowing that surrender meant total annihilation. However, courage alone could not stop the relentless tide of the Khan's magnificent war machine. Anticipating the invasion, the Japanese constructed a massive stone wall all along the coast. Known as the Genkō Bōrui, this rugged stone barrier stretched for miles to block cavalry charges. Defenders used this wall to channel the invaders into narrow, fatal entrapments upon the beaches. Samurai archers fired from elevated positions, briefly stalling the relentless Mongol advance. Fierce, hand-to-hand combat erupted wherever invaders managed to breach the stone fortifications. Katanas clashed against Mongol blades, sparking fiercely in the fading light of the afternoon sun. Mud, crimson stains, and seawater mixed as men fought and fell in brutal struggles along the dark shoreline. They fought with pure ferocity, preferring an honorable death over shameful captivity. Yet the sheer volume of enemy troops constantly replenished their front line, exhausting the defenders. Wounded samurai, covered in ash and dirt, stubbornly held their ground behind the broken, crumbling stone walls. Every passing hour severely depleted Japanese strength, pushing them to the brink of collapse. As dusk approached, the horizon was choked with thousands of fresh Mongol ships waiting to deploy. The defenders realized that surviving another day of this onslaught was highly unlikely. According to chronicles, despair settled deeply into the hearts of the weary Japanese forces. The empire of the Khan seemed utterly invincible, a crushing weight pressing on the island. Japanese commanders prayed intensely at local shrines, begging ancient gods for a divine miracle. Night fell upon the battle-scarred beaches, bringing a temporary, tense halt to the violent fighting. Both sides tended to their wounded and dead, fully aware that tomorrow would decide the nation's fate. To avoid deadly nighttime ambushes by samurai raiding parties, the Mongols made a fateful call. Mongol commanders ordered their infantry to retreat from the beaches and board the massive warships. They intended to rest securely on the water, planning a final coastal assault at sunrise. 4,000 vessels anchored closely together in Hakata Bay, forming a floating city. It seemed a brilliant tactical move to conserve troop stamina and utilize naval strength. Locking the army inside wooden ships on unpredictable waters carried a massive, hidden risk. Far out in the dark Pacific Ocean, an unnatural drop in atmospheric pressure began. Nature, indifferent to the wars of men, was quietly brewing an apocalyptic typhoon. Swirling black clouds rapidly gathered, completely blocking out the faint light of the crescent moon. The air grew strangely heavy and suffocatingly still, just before the violent winds finally struck. Japanese guards on the shore felt a sudden chilling shift in the wind, looking toward the sea in awe. A low, terrifying rumble echoed from the deep ocean, growing louder with each passing second. Without modern science, the Mongols had no warning of the impending natural disaster. Moored tightly together in the narrow bay, the great fleet was a sitting duck for the brutal storm. The strategic decision to sleep on the water, meant to save lives, sealed their horrific, watery doom. Do you think the commander's fatal mistake was sheer arrogance, or a lack of geographic knowledge? By midnight, the storm unleashed its full fury upon the unsuspecting Mongolian forces. Hurricane-force winds ripped through the bay, snapping massive, thick wooden masts as easily as brittle twigs. Towering waves, higher than city walls, violently picked up the colossal warships and tossed them. Because the fleet was anchored so tightly together, the massive ships brutally smashed into each other. The agonizing sound of oak planks splintering echoed over the deafening roar of the storm. Invaders who had conquered continents on horseback found themselves utterly helpless on the water. Absolute chaos erupted on the decks as heavily armored men were violently swept overboard. The heavy leather and iron gear, once a great advantage, became deadly anchors pulling them down. Screams of drowning warriors were swallowed instantly by the merciless vortex of the Black Ocean. Lightning flashes revealed a horrific scene of utter devastation and vast human suffering. Desperate soldiers clung to floating debris, praying to their gods, but the typhoon showed zero mercy. Ships that broke free from the massive tangled mess were mercilessly hurled against the sharp coastal rocks. The pride of the Khan's navy was being completely dismantled by the sheer, unbridled force of nature. For hours, the hurricane punished the invaders, crushing hopes of conquest in a watery grave. Sheltering behind mountains and walls, Japanese forces could only listen to the terrifying roars. They understood that something profoundly supernatural was happening, just beyond the dark shoreline. Many believed the ancestral spirits of Japan manifested to protect their sacred home. When the brutal storm finally broke and dawn arrived, the scene was entirely apocalyptic. The once mighty Mongol fleet, the apex of military power, was completely gone from view. Instead, the tragic coastline was choked with an endless blanket of splintered wood and fallen warriors. Tens of thousands of elite soldiers perished in a single night without striking a single blow. Samurai cautiously emerged from their positions, absolutely stunned by the sheer devastation. Walking among the enormous ruins of the Armada, they found very few survivors to capture. According to ancient texts, less than a fraction of the massive invading force returned home alive. Kublai Khan's invincible empire suffered its most humiliating and catastrophic defeat. This deliverance birthed the legendary concept of Kamikaze, translating to the divine wind. Japanese believed their sacred archipelago was protected by powerful divine spirits. This event reinforced Japan's strict policy of national isolation for many centuries. The massive, shattered Mongol vessels remained buried deep beneath the sands of Hakata Bay for ages. Modern underwater archaeology has uncovered these artifacts, proving the ancient texts. We can now touch the physical evidence of the greatest naval disaster in history. Rusted iron anchors and broken ceramic bombs stand as a grim testament to this great failure. Kublai Khan's ambition was completely crushed, not by clever tactics, but by atmospheric pressure. This history forces us to question the fragility of human power against Mother Nature. The Kamikaze legacy became deeply woven into the spiritual heart of Japan. It stood as a powerful symbol of divine protection and resilience for many centuries. Relying on weather is a very dangerous gamble in the unforgiving theater of war. A natural storm tore apart the Mongol fleet, forever changing the destiny of the Eastern world. The massive Mongol Empire never attempted to conquer the Japanese archipelago again. Their terrifying aura of invincibility was permanently broken on these shores. Japan would remain fiercely isolated, building its unique culture far away from foreign wars. This incredible tale of survival became a cornerstone of their proud national identity. Even centuries later, the divine wind concept was used to inspire soldiers in modern wars. History proves that even the most brilliant generals cannot control the chaotic weather. Sometimes, the greatest defender of a sovereign nation is simply the unpredictable ocean. A sudden drop in air pressure managed to accomplish what thousands of swords could never do. The terrifying Mongolian war machine was ultimately swallowed by the cold Pacific depths. As we look back at the devastating wreckage buried beneath the dark sands of Hakata Bay, we must respect the overwhelming power of nature over human military ambition. The Japanese islands were safely secured by the legendary fury of the divine wind. A natural typhoon violently tore apart the invincible Mongolian armada. However, halfway across the globe, in the foggy, treacherous waters of northern Europe, the desperate English navy did not simply sit back and wait for a storm to save their homeland. Instead, they aggressively engineered their very own floating fire demons upon the dark waves. They burned down the colossal Spanish fleet, forever changing the balance of global sea power.